Hi, I'm Ian. I'm the artist that's put the show together here, and this is a collection of work which I've been working in partnership with the Haworth Gallery and Julian and Alison, the curators here, and also with Graham Windle from Atlantic Contemporary Art and Creative Lancashire. This is a collection of work which is in response to Accrington and its own identity, and also the Haworth itself and its own collection, and taking references from there whilst kind of balancing that in with my own work and style and ethos. So hopefully this is a collection of work that's going to kind of give people an insight not only just into me but also a reaction to the local area and the environment, and give something a little bit new and different for the gallery moving forward.
So you're looking forward to chatting with John tonight?
Yes, very much. Yeah, it'd be nice to engage in a bit of conversation there and kind of find out about different things, from where the work's come from, where I've come from, the kind of journey I've had with the artwork, and yeah, hopefully it might inspire something a little bit kind of tongue-in-cheek and a bit different.
Okay, Ian, so what first I want to talk about is you actually, and to give
Right.
it a piece, some roots, because you're actually from sort of around these parts, aren't you?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Originally born Ormskirk, raised in Skelmersdale. My dad was a town planner there, so born on a roundabout. We moved up to the northwest to Whitley Woods and then Salmesbury, where I'm now living back again actually. Kind of moved away there in 1990, and then a few years ago kind of found my way back up.
I mean, because this is like a Creative Lancashire event, funded by Lancashire County Council, I had to get that in somewhere.
Coming back up to Lancashire was the last place I ever thought I'd be. It wasn't on my agenda to kind of move back up here.
Where do you think you'll end up, in London or Berlin or something? Or?
Berlin would have been nice. At one point, I actually thought it could have been Toronto or Australia. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But I moved away for studies in 1990 down to Birmingham. Went to study university at Coventry.
So
was
what were you studying there?
Fine art.
Yeah.
Did fine art. Did 2 years at Blackpool College art and design, and then graduated. Went down to Birmingham. Went to Coventry. Was around Birmingham for about 14 years. Then after that, ended up moving down to Birmingham. Sorry, not Birmingham. Brighton. For about 5.5 years, and then ended up in London for a few years. And then a few circumstances kind of changed, and that's when I moved back up north.
I mean, were you always arty? I mean, you went to university to do fine arts.
Yeah.
Well, was this something like when you were at school? What was the moment? I always think, when I speak to people about music, there's always an alpha moment when you go from being a listener to a creator. Well, I mean, what was that for you?
Probably as a young kid, just kind of doodling on the living room floor, and for whatever reason there was stuff there that was just kind of picked up on, and I just loved kind of being creative. It's where I always felt more comfortable.
Is that because your dad was a town planner? It's sort of in the background, or is that such a different thing?
Almost. He never got the chance to be. He wanted to do art, but he never got the chance to do it. His dad would never allow it, so he ended up going into his father's coal business, and the nearest he got to it was actually training to be an architect. So any signs that I had kind of being creative and getting anything from him, he was a wonderful draftsman, an absolute amazing drawer, and I've still got some of his drawings in my studio. He could pick up a pencil and just do a little sketch of a kind of hillside or kind of lane or whatever, and it'd just be beautiful. The kind of thing that some of us would probably go to art school and spend years kind of learning to kind of get that technical ability and draw. He could just pick it up and just do it so naturally. It was wonderful. So that kind of side for me, for my own creativity, definitely kind of came from him. And when he saw that coming out, and both him and my mum were kind of very encouraging. And I ended up doing when I was at primary school, I ended up doing these oversized pieces of Vincent van Gogh for the Starry Night and Sunflowers. And it must have caused a stir, because I remember Mum and Dad grabbing them and kind of sticking them in the loft. And,
what kind of stir? Like, he's going, oh no, he's going to be an
it's
artist.
like, what?
Throw his life away.
It was like, what's he doing? No, they just loved it. They just kind of kept on pushing me and kind of encouraging me. So it just kind of went from there. And then when I got to secondary school, I was never really that academic, but art class was the one that I always felt most comfortable with. So I kind of did that from O level, and then kind of pushed it on to A level. And then it was at A level I was kind of like, yeah, I'd like to actually continue with this. So I got kind of encouraged to go and take that further. And that went into Blackpool.
And when you were at school, did they sort of open that Pandora's box of all the other arts that you, or was it very narrow, you know, and you think, I'm sure there must be more to it than this?
I think back then it was probably more narrow. It was just kind of like, okay, you're good at art, you can draw, you can do this. Just see where it takes you. Because you always, you know, back in the day, back in the 80s, when you were at school, it was always kind of the careers officer. And that kind of talk of, what would you like to do? Would you like to be a doctor, or would you like to go into the army? And I went to a private secondary school in Lytham St Anne's, so... Yeah. So you weren't encouraged really for the arts. It was nothing that was ever going to be... It wasn't a considered career. So for me, that side of education wasn't... It never really kind of helped make me flourish.
Was that frustrating? I mean, did you have your heart set on that? Or do you think, I could just do that as a hobby, or I'm going to get a proper career? Or
I think at that stage, I didn't quite know. It was there, but I didn't quite know. It only just started... It came out more when I left sixth form and went to Blackpool College of Art. And I made a couple of good friends there. And that was actually the 2 best years in education I ever had. It kind of opened up, like you said, that was my Pandora's box moment. The thing that started to really kind of kick in there was the natural ability to draw. And actually, bear with me 1 second, because I'm just going to
show us.
I am. It's just kind of clicked in with something. That's the opening shot, just to get you all on board. Because
who's that then?
It's me. I'm hoping that's me. I'm hoping that's the right photograph from the family archives.
What a cute baby you were.
Almost. I think that's changed over the years. That's the only decent shot I could get from college. That's Blackpool School of Art. And
I mean, the School of Art at Blackpool's actually produces some really good people, don't it, over the years? It's not the sort of place anybody expects to come from, isn't it?
Well, it had a really good reputation, and the campus next door as well for the technical drawing as well had a really, really strong take in there. But the facilities that we had there on the foundation were superb, absolutely superb. It was literally kind of like a brand new building. So all the rooms and the facilities there everything was catered for: printmaking, textiles, drawing, life drawing. It was just a great place to be. You know, nothing was impossible. You were just allowed to kind of find yourself and kind of get on board. I did a bit of photography, really enjoyed textiles. My drawing really kind of, because I did the introductory year, we had 2 years there, so the foundation was 1 year, the introductory was the start. And the tutors there were absolutely superb. The level of kind of skill that they had and the encouragement that they put in. I mean, you weren't allowed to be late. You had to turn up, you had to be on time, you had to get stuck in and just kind of get on there.
But that's interesting, because art is a discipline as well. I think a lot of people think great art, you just sort of stagger around, drink loads of bottles of wine and make a painting about 2 in the morning. Really, it's probably like music. You have to get up at 9 in the morning and craft it sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, you've got to be self-disciplined. Yeah, you've got to really kind of jump in on that, and it's not going to make itself. You've got to find your way forward, and you've got to grab the bull by the horns and kind of dig yourself in.
I mean, I know this is a slight tangent, but you know, on a typical day, this would be the blank white, or you would stand there like 9 o'clock in the morning thinking, where do I go from here? I mean, it's just part of the discipline to actually make yourself go in there and start the work.
Yeah, it's you've got the discipline, you've got the passion. Because if you haven't got the passion, you're not going to want to discipline yourself. You're not going to want to get in there and get it done. And again, it's probably something else I'll come back to later on. But having that time at the art college and then doing the degree, I got a studio for a few years afterwards in Birmingham at the Custard Factory when it first opened, and I must have been there for about 5 years. That stopped in the late 90s, about 98, 99. Due to circumstances, I had to leave, kind of get full-time work. So having that break from then up until about 2016, 2017 really made me hunger for being creative and getting back to my painting.
Oh, so you actually appreciated
Yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah, definitely. Coming back to it now, I'm more hungry for it now than I probably was before because I couldn't do it. Graduating and kind of doing art back then, you just didn't have the opportunity or the chances that we do now. You know, we've got so much more at our disposal for kind of self-promotion and kind of getting your work out there and getting it seen. Back then, you weren't taught anything at college or degree level as, you know, this is how to get yourself out there. This is who to go and approach. This is how to market yourself. Or even, you know, things to do with galleries, contacts, you know, contracts, how to navigate it all. It just wasn't there.
So it's basically just teach you to do art and then
Yeah,
you find it for
well,
yourself.
I would say teaching the art was more on the foundation year and the year before than degree level. Degree level I kind of found you were kind of left alone to your own devices, and I don't think at that age I probably was disciplined enough where I am now, and I just didn't enjoy it. I kind of got lost with it a little bit, and I'm just chucking this one in here just quickly before I move on, because this is somebody that I got to know very well at Blackpool and became a very good, close, dear friend. And then a few years ago we got back in contact when I moved back north, and she provided me with a studio space. So
Is that the studio space you have now?
yeah, this is in Blackpool. Yeah. This book really kick-started a lot of stuff for me.
Yeah, so where did this book come into your life then?
I was in New York for a weekend with my partner at the time, and me being me, even though it was New York and there's all these fantastic sights to see, I found a record store and ended up wandering around and kind of desperate to grab a CD or a piece of music. And anyway, we were wandering around and I caught this book, picked it up, had a flick through, and it just really caught my attention. And it's about this was published in 1990, I think I got that in 91. And it's that changing aspect of graffiti, whereas in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was that kind of very stylized kind of form of graffiti on the side of trains, subway trains, and that kind of very stylized, colourful, oversized kind of lettering. This was kind of the advent of a new kind of form with things like that you can see there, like Shadow Man, Richard Hambleton, and then kind of the starting of paste ups, and a kind of a far more abstracted version of graffiti.
Moved towards art, and art was moved towards graffiti, and you somehow in the middle of those two ways of creating art. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it I don't know. It just kind of triggered something, and then after kind of seeing that book, I ended up getting my camera, and then whenever we went anywhere, whenever we went abroad, whenever we were walking around cities and stuff like that, I'd just be taking pictures of walls and then kind of finding different things that kind of caught my eye.
Like stencil arts, graffiti arts and things.
And kind of paint surfaces, decaying surfaces, walls, just anything like that.
So I mean, obviously the art and what somebody's painted or created looks great, but actually the surface as well is what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the physicality of that surface.
Definitely. There's kind of things like torn posters and peeling paint, all that kind of stuff. It just, I don't know, it kind of felt like a bit of a magpie with all these photographs of it. It just, and I used to get in a bit of bother as well, because whenever we were away and kind of walking around all these beautiful cities and kind of, you know, let's go here, let's have a look at this church, let's go and I'd be like, I'm just going down this back alley for a minute, because that's just caught my eye. And then somebody would be kind of stopped dead and turn around and go, where's Ian gone?
I mean, what was it about the surfaces that was intriguing? Was it because there's an element of decay to it, or is it an energy to it, or is it just because it just looks good?
I'm not too sure. I don't know. It just grabs me. There was, I think, let's just check. There we go. Perfect. This was a painting that I saw when I was doing my studies. It was a painting by Peter Lanyon, and I think, if I remember rightly, it was in the Harris Museum in Preston. And it's quite a large-scale painting, and I always remember seeing it and then going up close and seeing this big, massive impasto, thick white paint mark on it, and just thinking, I love that. I don't know why, but I just really love it. I was looking at it and just thinking, I want to create work like that. I want to, I don't know, it just really pulled me in. And
Because that's part of your signature style, isn't it? You know, a line, or, I mean, or just a random blue thing. It's not random, obviously, but it's. I'm intrigued by this because
it is actually random.
But it's in the right place. I mean, if I did that, it'd be in the wrong place. Somehow you put it in the right place, and I'm intrigued by that. How would you even know where to put it?
I don't.
Yeah.
Half the time, I don't.
It's all about it's instinct, and
Yeah,
you just follow your instinct, your subconscious,
Yeah.
and that's the art of art, isn't it?
It's trying to recreate. It's creating something of my own, but recreating a lot of stuff that. This piece in particular is probably a really good example, and the other pieces within the gallery, of where I've wanted to be getting to with my work for many, many years. And after, say, 25, 30 years of constantly photographing these elements around city walls, and then looking at so much variations of varying abstract artists and contemporary artists, this now is kind of, for me, it's kind of a bit of a pinnacle of kind of chasing that style of work and that composition.
Is it? I mean, I guess it's almost like a deconstruction, isn't it? Because even that's an image. You can sort of see it's like a sort of a human shape.
Yeah.
You kind of deconstructed it down further, and but I can also see elements of the walls you're talking about as well. You know, this actually looks like it's on a wall in a sense. So it's got a three-dimensional physical aspect to it.
Especially within the centre of this piece, specifically with the negative space, has become quite a key kind of style element of the current work. And again, there's going to be, I wonder whether we'll get to it here. I actually can draw and paint, just to let you know. It's something very different to what I've done before. It's quite a collaborative piece. It's not just myself and my work. It's kind of a lot of influences from different sides, the gallery themselves, and then the environments, and kind of bringing those things together to create a body of work that's hopefully kind of having that conversation of who and what Accrington is, and where does my work fit into that? How does the gallery fit into that? And giving the venue a different conversation in terms of artwork and presenting something different for people to come and see. So hopefully it's going to give them a challenge, whether that's good or bad, and give them something colourful to come in and kind of react with. Yeah, that's what I did at Degree. It was my partner at the time, and part of the work that I did at college level that got me into getting a degree was my figurative work. That was my strength. And the drawing work that I did, I seemed to have a natural ability to do it, and the tuition there was fantastic. So they were really good at kind of honing you in on how to kind of observe, how to draw, and doing the old kind of pencil marks and kind of measurement. And
So it's very, very disciplined.
yeah.
So would you say that's a completely different way of creating a piece of art than that?
Yeah.
So I was going just, or are they much closer than I was thinking? But they're not. They are very different. Or there is some kind of link to the.
There's.
The background is the same sort of colours, isn't it?
The markings, the markings. Some of the markings are kind of quite similar. And I used to do these kind of quite quickly as well. I did a fair number of them of my dad, and I used to do them on scraps of cardboard, and they'd probably take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I used to really enjoy it, that challenge of kind of marking something up and doing a painting and trying to get that likeness and making that as lifelike as possible.
Is it like the likeness, like a photograph, or are you trying to capture something deeper, like the person beyond the physicality? Or is it a mixture of the two? It's not a photograph, obviously. That's what's great thing about painting, isn't it? There's so much more in it, isn't there?
For me, it was always about from life. So it was definitely something deeper, because I think there's something from, if I was painting you now and doing a portrait of you, there would be something in the finished product that would have a really strong sense of identity and life, more so than doing it from photograph, in my opinion anyway. That doing those works always, because there were, you kind of felt this rush to kind of get it done, because I was always aware of the sitter, I was always aware of that person kind of sitting there and having to sit still. You've really got to push yourself to kind of get the marks down and get that put together. And there's something that comes from those pieces which I think just has more kind of honesty and more life. I'm not really good at kind of doing anything from photograph. It just doesn't work for me. But that's where that work really shone in its own at that time, and that really kind of propelled me forward at college and foundation.
This specific, or this sort of part of a series?
This one was actually from degree level. The pieces from the previous period when I was on degree course, and I've just remembered actually, Colette, who are now kind of, we share that studio space, and we were at college together. I actually did a portrait of her when she came over. She drove over from Blackpool to Salisbury on a moped, and we kind of spent the evening together. I did a quick portrait of her on cardboard, and then I was kind of doing her. I did my father a few times and a couple of other people, and they kind of got a bit of notoriety with one of my tutors. He went, "Yeah, you've really got something there."
Was that the first time you felt you'd been recognised?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And where do you at that point? Where would you take that sort of skill?
I don't know. I think I just kind of dived into it a little bit more, and just not basking in a bit of glory, but I never really had that. I never had that at secondary school. I never had that. I always struggled academically to a certain degree. I mean, it took me 2 attempts to get my maths, French and English. So kind of getting to a place with art where I was kind of quite comfortable and reasonably confident and starting to shine with that, it was a good place to be for me.
So, I mean, where'd you go? What's the next step from going to do stuff like that? It's obviously, that wasn't Tuesday and that was Wednesday. There's a little bit in between, isn't there?
Well, that was about 3 years worth on degree course. And then as I came out of that, and I got encouraged to, as the degree course came to an end, my partner at the time, Paul, and my father turned around and said, we found the custard factory in Birmingham, and they turned around and went, "You should get a studio space. You need to continue with this." And so we did. We rented a studio. It had just opened. There was a few other artists there, and then other businesses, design-led and arts and media. And it was a fantastic place to be at the time. And because there were so many other creatives there, you were just kind of in the right spot. But I didn't want to continue with figurative. I knew pretty much as soon as I came out, I actually wanted to explore abstract. That's where I wanted to kind of go forward with.
Is that because you were interested in abstract, and was that sparked by the graffiti art, or was that something that goes further back?
Well, funnily enough, as we come to this next one, this is me in the studio at the Custard Factory. I don't know, there was something there that was kind of ticking away that I wanted to kind of work with and play around with, and it just seemed like the natural kind of moment to kind of come out. And I did my first exhibition, which was it was a series of big, large canvases, probably about similar size to that actually. The majority were all kind of portrait, and there was one big, huge kind of landscape one. It was all kind of based on water, because I had this thing about blue. And when I was a kid, I used to love kind of flipping through travel brochures and seeing all the pictures of the Greek islands and the clear blue water.
That's because you grew up in Lancashire, where the sky was grey and the sea was grey.
Quite probably, yeah. And the water was never that blue at Blackpool.
no, it's got a brownie colour,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So yeah, that was kind of my starting point, and then it kind of went from there, and the work kind of veered out and kind of went into a few different places. And towards the tail end of my time at the Custard Factory, the work did start taking on a little bit more of a kind of urban aspect and a graffiti slant. And yeah.
Was that a deliberate thing then, to incorporate the graffiti in there? You trying to find a way, get those ideas you had from before?
I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was just something that was just based on that book and what I was looking at and kept on looking at. It just kind of came about. I think it was just naturally just kind of finding its way into the work. And then it kind of got cut short a little bit because of circumstances at the time. I had to go and find full-time work. I couldn't fully fund it, and I couldn't kind of fund a whole lifestyle based around it. So I went into full-time work and had to kind of put it to one side. And after a couple of years of kind of going through different things, working at a gallery, working for a design agency, I ended up working in events. And once you start working in events work, that just becomes all-consuming because of the long hours and kind of working away. So I ended up putting it to one side, and that was from kind of 98, 99, right up until 2016, 2017. Kept on going to galleries, kept on as much as I could kind of immersing myself in art, in kind of visits and kind of reading up on stuff and what have you, but physically creating work was a challenge. But it never left, the itch to do it never left.
So when you came back, was that something you had to sort of force yourself to have the time to do? Or was you found you got the hunger for it again? Or how did that work? How did you come back into the art world?
It's kind of a bit of a strange one. It was always there. I was still kind of doing the odd sketch, and I was always doing photography. Whenever I was out and away, whether I was working on an event, taking, I don't know, a photograph of a venue floor with all markings on and what have you, or getting out to a gallery and kind of taking photographs of work there and using it as reference, or kind of finding kind of exhibitions to go and see, and going to gigs and kind of keeping that creative aspect at the forefront in my life, even though I wasn't actually physically creating kind of work and painting. And then 2012, I ended up getting kind of meeting somebody online, which kind of set off a bit of a chain of events. And no idea who this person was. We ended up talking, and they were out in Toronto, and we'd been talking for a few days, and he turned around and went, why don't you, if you're not doing anything next week and you say you're off, why don't you come out to Toronto? And I went, yeah, okay, maybe, yeah. I was feeling
It's quite
a bit,
spur of the moment.
it was, and I was feeling quite impulsive. We were chatting away, we were getting on really well. So we did. Ended up 7 days in Toronto. Kind of got to know him a little bit more. Turned out he was a bit of a character. He was a filmmaker. And it kind of blew the barn doors open a little bit. And from that point, we were kind of in contact and on and off. I kind of came back to London. I was working at Olympia at the time as an event manager. And something from that trip definitely triggered something and kind of broke open a kind of fissure in my mind about, is this what I really want to be doing? And it just really set me thinking. Anyway, this kind of interaction, this relationship was kind of on and off for a few months, and it got to kind of Christmas time, and then it kind of got reignited. And I was a little bit cautious, and the idea of kind of trying to look at it as a potential partnership and me moving out to Canada kind of got mooted. So I packed my job in, and then he turned around and went, oh, by the way, if you're thinking of moving out specifically just for me, just make sure you're doing it for you, for your own reasons. And I went, right, okay. I've just packed my job in. You were kind of on about, us being a partnership here. So I just thought, right, fuck it. Gave everything up, sold my house, and took off travelling. So went to Australia, lived with a friend out there for 2 months, and just gave everything up. So that was 2013. I was 42. Never done anything like that before in my life. Had no plan, and just took off with it. And it was probably about the best thing I'd ever done.
Is it important for art to have no safety nets?
Yeah, quite.
I mean, does great art come out of domesticity? Or do you need to do something? Well, I mean, obviously now it's different, but do you have to rip it all up and start again?
I'd never really thought about it like that before, but this situation definitely kind of created that. This slide here is in Sydney, and when I got there, I kind of found myself in this kind of space of, right, shit. I was meant to be doing one thing, but I'm now doing this. What the hell am I going to do? I just went, right, just go out there and just do whatever you need to do, just find yourself. And I just ended up kind of spending a lot of time walking around with a camera. The friend that I was staying with kind of pushed me out to a few different things and went, look, I've got a few mates here, go and speak to them, go and do this, and we've got this museum here, we've got this there. Just go and do whatever you want to do. And that's what I did. And I ended up in total being away for about 8 months. 2 months in Sydney. I got talked back into going back to Canada by the ex, the person that I'd kind of got to know, and ended up living with him and staying on his living room floor for about 6 months, which ended up being a whole new adventure in itself, and kind of doing road trips via Greyhound into the States. So getting to see New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Provincetown, Boston, doing the whole of Toronto.
So when did the art come back out of this kind of state of flux?
It was walking around. In fact, when I was spending a lot, because the guy that I was staying with, Jay, he was working obviously, so I was kind of left to my own devices. So I spent so many days just out on my own with a camera and just walking around. And again, it was going back to the graffiti. So
it's reconnecting you with the original inspirations.
Yeah. Because for a few years prior to that, I'd got an iPhone and I'd put the camera down. So like most people nowadays, you have your smartphone. So you're kind of using that to kind of navigate life in whatever way, whether it's making a call, taking a photo, or as well as taking kind of photographs on my iPhone, I kind of picked up the camera again and was kind of starting to use that to record kind of different things and kind of get better shots. And I just found myself just kind of wandering around all the time and going to a few different galleries. I mean, I saw some amazing art over 8 months in both areas. I got to see work by, Francis Bacon. I got to see a retrospective of his. Anish Kapoor, Lister. I got to know his work, kind of walking around the streets of Sydney. Things. Who else? Kind of back streets and kind of towns in the States. Pittsburgh was one. Got to the Warhol Museum, and I got to see work by Ron English. We took a wild kind of road trip out, and we went past this penitentiary somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and we took a diversion, went into this kind of small little backward kind of American town, and I got the guy that I was with, Malcolm, I got him to kind of stop the car and went, just let's go and have a walk around, will you? Walked around a couple of the things, and all of a sudden there's this bright, colourful, kind of really surrealist kind of a graffiti work, and that's when I found out it was actually Ron English. So it was these kind of periods, it was just literally kind of doing all these moments of going out and kind of...
Almost like reconnecting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So when did you actually pick up the paint again?
It was probably towards the tail end of that whole 8 months. This is kind of very typical of the stuff that I was kind of photographing on a daily basis. And then these kind of torn images, these posters of kind of figures and portraits, and a lot of the stuff that, again, it was set off by that book from the early 90s that I was kind of constantly photographing this stuff, but was doing it in more earnest on this trip. And
it's interesting, this picture, because this is not put there as a piece of art, but the rip and the tear, you perceive this and made it a work of art in your head, haven't you?
There's another one coming up. This one's in Sydney. There's another one coming up from Toronto. But I always kind of saw these as whatever narrative was in my head, I saw them as something different to what they originally were. Mm-hmm. And I've kept on photographing them to this day. I mean, I drive everyone wild. I'm still kind of doing it when I'm walking out down the street and I'll just disappear and somebody will be having a conversation.
So that really is your main point of inspiration, or?
Yeah, that and kind of random kind of markings. It's, I don't know, it still triggers something. It still fires something up for me. I'd say it's a good chance to give people a background into what I do, what the work is, where it comes from. And the work is kind of highly abstract with a kind of slightly urban edge. There's also quite a kind of diary element to it and a very personal kind of emotional response in the work. And hopefully that this is a chance to kind of put that forward to people, give it a bit of a bigger context. And this is in Toronto, kind of about a mile or two walk from where I was staying at the time, because I was staying in the heart of the gay village in Church and Wellesley. And so I used to just kind of take myself off and have some time on me. I'd put my headphones on, get my camera, and just walk to my heart's content. I mean, that kind of time of the year in Toronto, it was bright sunshine, beautifully warm, and I just thought, right, I'm never going to get the chance to do this ever again. I'm 42 years of age, I'm walking down the road just minding my own business and doing my own thing, just make the most of it. And
that's a pretty amazing endpoint, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
That actually looks like a painting more than real life.
Well, that kind of thing, it just fires me up, so much. I mean, you can see kind of markings from the paintings of that kind of, little sections and abstracted little notes on there. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so colourful as well, isn't it? And it's so dense. I mean, a lot of your work is actually it's quite empty, isn't it? You don't, you have detail, but not like that, which is like an avalanche, a tsunami of detail, isn't it?
It's interesting. I think the work has been that dense, and it's only up until recently where I've been introducing this kind of negative aspect that almost kind of referencing those kind of torn posters, like this piece here, and yeah, I've been using that kind of blanking out process as a way of trying to minimise what I do. I'm trying to create the kind of more bolder and more simple kind of compositions. So actually blanking the canvas out is kind of, for me, it's almost like a cheat's way of trying to simplify my work and kind of making sure that I don't kind of overdo it.
But it's very hard to do. I mean, it's like with music where people put too much in.
Yeah.
Minimalism feels really empty, but it's actually creates a mystery and a mystique. And what's that alluding to is you listen to a lot of electronic music, probably very minimalistic electronic music, when you do these paintings.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting parallel there.
I think being in the studio these past few years has really kind of allowed me to focus on a lot more that I've always been passionate about. You know, we were talking before about, you know, I listen to a lot more now to Radio 6 and people like Marianne Hobbs and those kind of programs, and that wave of kind of music that keeps coming through, and the new kind of styles of music and dance music and electronica, and that really kind of gets me into a good zone of kind of working and creating, and those kind of minimal kind of aspects to kind of some electronica work, and there's definitely similarities there within the painting.
I mean, would perfection for you be that was all white and just a little black dot in the corner, but in the right place?
Yeah, pretty much. Kind of rejected the typical white canvas and kind of went straight for the
wall,
the
concrete,
the kind of just the unprimed kind of canvas. I find that now a lot easier to work with. The white canvases and the kind of prime canvases, I almost find them a little bit sterile. Whereas that kind of gives me that more kind of naturalistic kind of feel of and kind of reference to kind of walls and urban kind of walls.
I mean, do you paint on walls?
I did a.
You won't get arrested.
I nearly did actually in Lisbon. My other half, Graham, did a lovely surprise treat and took us away to Lisbon. And somebody that I got to know in Toronto when I was out there was coming over there, who's kind of Portuguese heritage. So he organised a surprise trip, and we all went out. And Lisbon was just like this massive kind of Disney world of kind of urban kind of imagery and creativity, and loved it, absolutely loved it. And we kind of spent time walking around, and I got treated to a little sketchbook and a couple of marker pens and a little mini spray can of black paint. And I remember walking around the streets, and you've got all this beautiful kind of traditional kind of architecture and homes and little quaint lanes. But at the same time, you've got all the graffiti kind of going on and kind of going over these kind of beautiful kind of buildings. And I had this kind of spray paint in my hand, and I was going, I think I might make a few marks. I wonder if anybody's looking. And then my mate, who's Portuguese from Toronto, just turned around and went, I really don't like it. I really don't like people doing all this graffiti on the walls. And it actually stopped me, and I kind of respected what he was saying and went, I get you. So I nearly did, but didn't.
It's interesting because you're so fascinated by it when it's on the walls, taking hundreds of photographs of it.
Yeah.
So it's your interpretation of it. It's actually do it. I mean, do you like that? Do you like the way that's not actually a wall and it's got edges and it's a rectangle and you have to get it all within that space?
Yeah, I do like that challenge of kind of creating that creates something that looks kind of spontaneous and as random as that. Yeah, I enjoy the challenge of trying to make that, and it is a challenge to kind of do because I'm trying to find my own style and trying to find that language of what I do but you're doing it in quite a constrained way. Whereas this is just sprawled everywhere, you know.
So it's that meeting point between graffiti art ideas and more traditional sort of abstract art ideas, and that gives you the discipline to go back into the art world more than the graffiti world. So that's how you get the mix between the two.
Yeah. It's I mean, there's a bit of a process to doing it. I'll come on to that a little bit later. That there's some images that I want to show from the studio and the work and the process that I do, and especially to do with sketch work and how I kind of go forward and kind of create.
That's interesting. You have a plan that you work within.
Of sorts. I try not to plan too much, but when it comes to kind of setting up work, I do like to do a fair amount of sketching. It's almost like a kind of warm-up exercise, and you know, if you're an athlete, you're not going to, you know, go straight out onto the pitch in the field and just kind of dive in. You're going to do your warm-up exercise.
So you have some sort of structure. So it's again different from that, which is just randoms, 4 or 5 people just adding stuff on all the time.
Yeah.
This is actually a very disciplined. But let's have a look. That looks sounds interesting. So is that here in the slides?
It is. It would come to that in a minute. That. This was a break after coming back from my travels, and I had to come back from the travels because my dad wasn't too good at the time. Bless him, he'd kind of succumbed and was starting to come under dementia and the effects of it. So I had to come back home, put my travels to one side, and jump onto his healthcare and get that in place, which was kind of back up here in Samlesbury. So this was kind of a different kind of moment. The kind of gravity, reality kind of kicked in a lot more. And this was a project. This is something that I'm hoping that I'll come back to in a few years, maybe. But it was my way of kind of reacting to his condition and kind of trying to take on board what was going on and trying to communicate with him, because he'd lost his speech. And this was the only way that I could really interact with him whenever I went up to visit him.
So it's more about the actor taking the photograph and his reaction to that than the actual photograph itself, or is it both?
A bit of both. A bit of both. Whenever I picked up my camera, the house that he was in was our family home, and both him and my mum, when she was alive, were incredibly house proud. But because of the condition he was in, at this stage, obviously it had kind of gone down. He wasn't able to kind of keep it up, and the companion that he had at the time had a very negative influence on it. So this moment here for me was kind of incredibly precious to get that time with him, because it was incredibly short. It was very difficult to kind of communicate apart from these moments when I picked up the camera. So I kind of spent a bit of time recording. It was literally the last 6 months that he was alive at home. So that kind of that moment of recording that kind of set something else off as well. And because I was working again at the time, I got my old job back to my boss was incredibly gracious at Olympia, and allowed me to kind of jump back in. And
after about 3 years or something. Oh, you're back.
Well, actually, no. It was about 9 months.
Yeah.
And I came back, and fortunately, somebody else in the same position had left, and they went, "Would you fancy your old job back?" And I was like, maybe. And that's how it happened. So it allowed me to kind of have a base and a wage to kind of jump up and down and kind of check on my dad.
It's an incredibly poignant picture there. I mean, like the overgrown garden and the chaos in the house, and he does look sort of lost in his own room. I mean, is that deliberate? Is that what you're trying to tell, though? Or is it just a great photograph of somebody?
Yeah, it definitely caught a moment. Yeah, it's just kind of caught me off guard a little bit.
Well, it's an emotional picture, isn't it? That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Yeah. So what was his reaction to you taking the photographs? Though would he look at the camera or something you say?
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, he followed me around, and he kind of reacted quite interestingly to it. That he knew I was there, he knew what I was doing, and it was our little moment of communication.
Yeah, so it's because it was hard to communicate because of the condition that it was in, but that was a moment where you just locked in the same sort of space.
There's a hard drive full of these images somewhere, which I broke them down into a series of posts over 20 weeks. And each post had a written narrative to it that was basically describing what was going on, whether it was how he was, or what was happening with social services, or how I was reacting to it. And I just put one out for a week, for 20 weeks, and they were all in black and white. So basically there's a hard drive there full of colour photographs, which they just really kind of illustrate his environment at the time. But I would like to go back to that. Definitely at some stage. And I think because I wasn't painting, I wasn't creating, that was another way of being able to create and actually being able to navigate my own feelings on that situation.
So it's partially that, it's partially emotional. There's an art aspect to it, also documentation.
Yeah. I remember seeing those photographs by Richard Billingham, about 20 years ago. He took the photographs of his family that were just really raw. And very uncompromising, and kind of some people kind of looked at them and went, "Ooh, they're a bit, just a bit much," but they were beautiful. They were so well done, and I think there's an element of that to this, that I did question myself why I was doing it, but I'm so glad that I've done it, because I now go back and look at those and think, yeah, that's kind of really caught that moment, especially that particular composition as well, because he loved his garden. He loved sitting in that kind of conservatory and looking out. And that is actually now our home as well.
Okay.
That's where I ended up moving back to after he passed away. And we decided to keep it and set it up as a new home and completely renovate it. So it was something completely new. It kind of closed that chapter. And it actually allowed this chapter to come forward. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include this. This is a really good chance for me to kind of put the work in context, give it more background for anybody that doesn't know me or doesn't know the work, and be able to kind of describe where the work comes from and kind of delve a little bit more into that process of abstraction and that kind of urban influence as well, and the influence that's kind of come into the work locally as well, which I've been collaborating with Gillian and Alison, the curators of the gallery, and also Graham from Atlantic Contemporary Art as well, just to kind of give this kind of context to the gallery as well. So yeah, it'd be good for people to see it. I was living back in London at the time, and I never lost that curiosity. I never lost that want to immerse myself in art or be around art or look at art. And again, kind of, living in London, and I used to take out a lot of walks on my own, going down the South Bank or going through town whenever I was off work, and kind of, just wandering around with my iPhone again and just kind of taking shots and just anything and everything that kind of caught my eye. And this is kind of typical of kind of walking around London. That kind of graffiti image and just that abstracted view of stuff. And this one's down in Brick Lane. That's great. I mean, the contrast between the photo and the background. Yeah, that I just kind of, I keep looking behind, I keep looking at the canvas, but that's, it's those kind of elements that just always kind of jumped out at me. The quite jarring juxtapositions. Yeah. And again, the images of kind of posters and billboards, and that's where the negative space came in. It's kind of replicating that the poster on a wall and then kind of ripping it off and taking it off and then seeing what's left behind. That's me in a moment at a gig, and just kind of linking back into to music and how important music actually is to me, and that level of release, response, reaction, that the creative process from bands and musicians as well. I really love that. The feeling you get at live music, the feeling you get from seeing a production and lights.
Has a painting ever made you feel like that?
Yeah, a few times.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
So it should, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you actually stand in front and go, whoa?
I would. I'm probably too shy to do it. It's probably my own kind of.
So that's the beauty of music, because you don't feel shy. You actually could do the crazy stuff when the volume's up.
Well, do you know what? I would love to be in a band. If I wasn't an artist, that's one thing that I would have loved to have done and kind of been on stage and kind of feeling that kind of music. Because when I go to a concert, I just get massively drawn into it, and I'm quite envious of you being in a band. I must admit, I think it's just a wonderful thing to do. Do you not get nervous when you go on stage?
No, I get really excited.
Really?
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling. Yeah.
Because I'd be stood at the sidelines just thinking, no, I don't know whether I can do this.
You're just thinking about the music.
Right. Okay.
Do you get nervous when you got a blank thing to paint on? It's the same thing, isn't it? Once you start and it's all enveloping, you're lost inside it. It's incredible, isn't it?
I don't get nervous with that. And funnily enough, the bigger the work's got, the less nerves I've got. I just want to dive into it, and I just want to get on with it.
That's exactly the same.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The music's enveloping, and so's the arts. It takes you over, and you're lost inside that little space. And
right.
Yeah.
So
surely that's why you do it, because to get lost in that space is a perfect moment, isn't it?
It is, and that's where the music comes in as well. That's where the kind of getting the passion back for music and listening to a lot of the electronica kind of stuff as well, and that kind of repetitive kind of beats, that kind of bass line, that soundscape that a lot of artists kind of create. I kind of listen to a lot of stuff like Daniel Avery, Rival Consoles, Max Cooper, going back to Aphex Twin, Underworld, all that kind of stuff, and it just really helps in that kind of space of creativity, and you're just able to kind of shut the world out a little bit more as well, and just kind of helps you kind of hone in a bit more on your work. But this is also with a good friend of mine from London as well that I'd known for a few years, and she went, The Prodigy are playing. Do you want to go and see him? And
now that looks like a Prodigy gig reaction. Yeah.
It was pure, perfect Prodigy. It was Alexandra Palace, and
I recognise the wall now.
Yeah,
the wooden walls.
Yeah, they came on and they were just absolutely fucking superb. Pardon my French. Really loud, and I don't know. I just always end up being a kid, back to being a teenager when I go to stuff like that.
Well, it's primal, isn't it? Like your art's primal, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's to get back to the primitive, which we have to do sometimes. It's good for us.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a reminder of what we are.
And it's some of that kind of primal kind of feeling and nature that I want to get back into the work as well. I've got a plan for a new set of work and paintings, which is to kind of take this kind of further and kind of develop on what I've done. And have that sense of structure, that sense of negative space, but start changing it and start kind of playing around with it a bit more, and then kind of bringing in that kind of primal aspect with a few more kind of paint marks and what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a couple of elements in, but using that kind of primal energy to make those marks on something kind of a little bit more restrained like that, but having something that's got a real blast of, real punch of energy like that image.
So when you were making that painting, this is what you'd be looking like. You wouldn't be going like that. You'd actually be like.
I don't know,
Yeah,
because I share
yeah.
a studio space with somebody, so I'm very conscious of them kind of looking through the window going, what the hell is he doing?
I don't think being self-conscious makes great art.
No, it doesn't. I think I might have to blank out the windows. And this is, I've got to include this because the person that I was with is a very good friend of mine. She's kind of almost a little bit of a muse. This is my friend Emma, and we ended up in Dungeness a few years ago, and we stayed at this beautiful kind of living architecture house, and just kind of took a few days out. There was a few of us there, and we just ended up messing around in the light on the shore and everything, and doing some photography. And this is one of the images that I took of her. And
I think that's a really amazing picture. It looks like a graveyard, like an Italian graveyard kind of shot.
yeah, I did a few, and she's got a real beauty and grace about her that I wanted to try and capture. But she's also quite incredibly shy as well, and that's why I've included this shot, because it just kind of just knocks her face out a little bit, because she's going to kill me when she knows that I've put her in this. But we were kind of like partners in crime, and when I was living in London as well, we went to a lot of exhibitions together, and that Prodigy gig as well. We could share the artwork, we could share the music, and she's a beautiful artist in her own right as well. She does the most amazing kind of canvases, and beautiful and simplistic of these kind of very minimal compositions and kind of beautiful kind of staining. So yeah, she's an important kind of addition into
So
my
photography
artwork.
is a key part of your expression, isn't it?
Well, it kind of always has been as well, because I've had to use that to record all the stuff that. It's another way of recording how I kind of view the world, I suppose, in some respects. There's a lot of bits that I kind of notice when I'm walking along that, these are the elements that I kind of pick up on a day-to-day kind of basis.
See, this is very you, isn't it? I mean, obviously you're drawn in by the building being upside down. And I like the juxtaposition out in the dirt, but it's actually the surface you're interested in, isn't it?
Well,
The bottom of the puddle.
It's getting the real and the unreal, and kind of getting that lovely kind of contrast and kind of juxtaposition of getting something really kind of perfect and linear, and then you've got all that mess at the bottom as well. And to me, that's really
the orange
beautiful.
plastic bag is is the dab, isn't it? The paint stroke.
I don't know. It just really kind of draws me in. But yeah, that was kind of a lot of stuff that I spent, quite a lot of time kind of photographing and just losing myself in. It's kind of one of those moments where I'm happiest, and again, that's a good representation of me kind of walking around on my own in London on the South Bank. And then this is coming up to the point of this was kind of the last stages, the last moments of my father, and bless him, as I mentioned earlier, he kind of took a fall. I ended up in hospital for 3 weeks, and so we ended up being by his bedside for those 3 weeks, and documented, took photographs each day, and this is one of them. And again, it may be something that at a later date I might put together. I just think it's something that so many people go through, and it's such a difficult thing to deal with for the person itself, and then for the partners and the family, that I kind of felt quite strongly about my own reaction to it, and kind of putting those things in place.
It's an incredibly emotive, powerful picture.
Yeah,
It's also a really important part of life in an odd way. I mean, ironically for your father and for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my own way of communicating on whatever level that is, of recording a moment and how I was kind of dealing with it. That probably sounds a little bit selfish, but
Well, it's part of it. It's a really important part of it.
yeah,
It can't be denied, can it?
no, and you know, I've had some very, very strong conversations about this since, and kind of reflected on it and kind of looked back, and yeah, I'm kind of glad that I've still got those. It kind of opens up another conversation at another time, I think, in the future, which we'll see. And then that was Dad sadly passed away in 2015, and then a few months later I ended up having a operation on my foot because my toe joint was knackered and it ended up being fused. So I ended up working from home in London for about 3 months, being stuck at home. And that led to me then kind of, because I was getting a bit bored out of my tiny mind and I couldn't move. Once I'd got my work done and got my work email sorted, I was like, I need to do something here. I need to kind of get on with something. And I ended up, we used to get all the plans for all the shows for Olympia kind of printed on this kind of big kind of sheets of thin paper. So I got a load of the offcuts, took them home, and then ended up kind of working on this process. Yeah, literally doing that.
And this is a point where you start coming back into your art more seriously.
Yeah. And
So it's a lucky break, wasn't it?
I'll tell you what, it was a very painful break. I ended up having 2 operations on it. I've never experienced pain like it. But no, it was a great kind of chance to kind of dive back into stuff, and I kind of started this process of I couldn't really kind of move out my room that much. I just thought, oh fuck it, just grab some paper and some pens, and I had some stuff left over. So I just ended up kind of working through stuff, and I set a process of getting a load of paper and then kind of going, right, I'm going to do these marks first, and then start again, and then do these set of marks second, and then kind of went on like this on this repetitive process of kind of building up a composition and an image, and it just seemed to work. It just got my head going back into that kind of process of creating again, and it just kind of fired stuff up. This is kind of coming. I kind of wanted to show a few slides of some of the work that's actually influenced me from contemporary art and other artists, and this is a painter that's figured really kind of heavily in my life, which is Howard Hodgkin, and you probably see a few similarities here as well. That abstraction and that style. I just think he's an amazing artist. He's just bowled me over the years. And this is actually, this particular piece is incredibly pertinent as well, because it's, the title is Painter Listening to Music. And it was the last painting he ever made.
Oh, really? Wow.
And for a man in his 80s to create a painting of that strength and power of an abstract nature, I just think is...
It's probably abstract on steroids. I like the way it's escaping out of the painting.
Yeah.
It's kind of postmodern uber meta, isn't it, that?
Yeah, absolutely. It just astounded me, and I've seen it in the flesh a few times. That picture is in the Gagosian Gallery in Grosvenor Hill, and it's a beautiful gallery in itself. It's a kind of work of art, you know, on its own. But to see a painting like that within that kind of space, it was quite a special moment. But his work really moves me. And there's other pieces as well that he does, which the brush marks, the colours, I don't know, he's just got this way of kind of creating an image that is just beautiful. Incredibly sensuous, incredibly bold, and you just look at it and just think, you've just put 2 marks of paint on a piece of board, but you just make it look like a ballet dance or a piece of poetry. It's stunning.
That is the genius, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then This one, which is an artist called Cy Twombly, and his style, again, his work, I just think is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. That kind of almost childlike quality to the markings and stuff. It's really influenced the work a hell of a lot. And then this piece here is, again, back to the same gallery, again, actually, the Gagosian in Grosvenor Hill in London. And this was, I think, just in kind of mid-break in the lockdown. And I managed to get down to London and meet up with my friend Emma. Notice she's not facing the camera again, which she'll be very pleased about. And we went to see this artist, Helen Frankenthaler. And again, wonderful exhibition because it's kind of shining a light on female abstract artists, which have been very badly overlooked over the years, and thankfully now their work's kind of been made kind of quite important and giving real significance to. But just the imagery, the way she uses paint, and the compositions are just absolutely stunning, really beautiful. And again, that's a scale that I really kind of admire. And another beautiful painter as well, Ed Clark, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But his brush marks, his sense of composition, they're just kind of beautiful. And it's that kind of, those marks, that spontaneity that it's something that I kind of try to put into the work, even though I've got a process of creating. It's trying to create something that looks like it's been done in one, not just in a series.
But there's an element to that in there. I mean, you create the framework and you also do the jam on the top. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a unique way of working. It's trying to kind of put something together, trying to capture the spontaneity of something like that, but also the spontaneity of that kind of urban element and that kind of graffiti kind of imagery. It's actually quite a challenge, and especially doing it on bare canvas as well, because once you put a mark on, it's there. It's very difficult to remove. If it was primed canvas, there'd be a way of getting that off with a bit more ease. So with this, once you're on, you're on. So you've kind of got to take that leap of faith and just think, right, I'm going to move that spray can just in the way that I want it to create that mark that I really want.
Trusting your instincts.
Yeah,
It's the key.
Yeah.
No, this is great. This is all the three-dimensional thing here, isn't it?
And again, yeah, it's a major part of the theme of the work that I look at and kind of go through. And we were taking a trip out to, I think, Wakefield and the gallery there, and we just left and we were driving down a road, and I literally kind of slammed the brakes on. Nearly gave my other half, my friend Emma, whiplash, and I went, I've just got to stop, I just need to go and take a photograph. I went, what are you on about? And then I went, that. Turned around and looking up at this big billboard and went, right, okay, we get you. And just took a series of shots of it. And yeah.
It's really good. Yeah.
This is going back to Lisbon and that moment of the sketchbook, and there's the spray can that I nearly used on somebody's wall but didn't.
All the signatures literally there.
Yeah.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left of this part before we open up to the floor. So is there any more slides?
There is. This is the studio space that when I moved back up I kind of came back to. And this is with my friend Colette, who I went to art college with. And this piece here is one that I did for a charity piece with. It was a series of 10 doors, which a number of artists were kind of brought in, a few people, luminaries from the Bristol scene, like Will Barras, Lucas Antics, and this was set up by a guy. The project was called A Year Outdoors, and it was to raise kind of highlight issues to do with homelessness and raise funds for that. And it was a really enjoyable piece to work on, and it kind of pushed me forward into this larger scale. And these pieces are about 2 meters high by about 1.5 meters wide. I did a series of these works on paper, and doing them each piece was done in a period of about 24 hours. So no matter when I started it or when I finished it, it all had to be done there and then. So I did those over a period of about 2 months, which was a really good kind of exercise in getting me used to working on a larger scale and kind of getting it done as quickly as possible, getting that kind of process kind of going and not thinking about it too much, just kind of literally kind of getting it out there. This is kind of partly me kind of taking photographs when I'm out and about on freelance work and been in events kind of bit, and then this is kind of one of the venue floor shots that I normally take when I've got a bunch of contractors building around me and work colleagues, and they all kind of stop dead and turn around and going, "What are you doing?" I'm taking a photograph of the whole floor. Why? Because I like it.
Looks like a record sleeve.
Yeah.
Like 4AD or...
And it's just that kind of thing. I mean, you can clearly see the kind of link there to my work. And again, this is going back to the process of kind of creating sketch works and doing them. I'll do them in a series of maybe 10, 20, 30, and it'll be like a 3-4 stage process of, use some ink, do one mark, do that right across all the pieces, and then jump in and do another mark with a different kind of, whether it be with a pen or a paintbrush, and then maybe do a kind of print kind of effect. And yeah, just kind of using that kind of repetition, those stages, to create a series of works. And those are kind of key to kind of setting up the canvases and the kind of next stage on where the work's going, and kind of helping me kind of almost kind of like limber up to a certain degree. And these pieces here, this is when the scale of the work increased in 2020, just during lockdown, and I started this new series of work, and it kind of changed something quite dramatically for me. Just kind of found that size just a lot more comfortable to be on and to work with. And then coming into last year, the start of last year, I kind of introduced this kind of blanking out process, which then kind of, like I was saying before, it was probably a cheat way of kind of getting that more minimal aspect.
By having more space.
Yeah. And kind of forcing myself not to kind of mark the canvas, because it's very easy to keep working on something and overwork something. So this was kind of way of trying to deconstruct the image and kind of go back into it. Blackpool Prom.
That's a nice stencil. Yeah.
I'm pretty certain that's Mr. Corbyn. And then again, these are kind of showing the newer works of that kind of blank space. This piece on the left, again, that's kind of really getting to a stage of that kind of minimal composition, which really kind of drawn to. And then the piece on the right-hand side is kind of just illustrating the way that I work with kind of actually attaching the canvas to the wall and kind of getting it stretched out, and then allowing to kind of throw stuff at it and kind of get the inks on, or acrylics, and getting them stained and just letting them run off. And the cardboard at the bottom is kind of where I collect a lot of the kind of the runoffs. Which
It's almost a work of art on its own.
Well, I've got some of those pieces, and I kind of keep them to one side. There's something that I've kind of got up my sleeve, which, based on the work that I've done here for the Haworth, is something I'm looking into for the future. Because the runoffs I do tend to use as kind of monoprints and then kind of start them as sketches. So I always have these kind of series of kind of works on paper running in conjunction with the works that I'm doing on canvas. I'm just kind of interested to kind of see where they go and kind of what kind of life they take. And then this is kind of coming, you know, kind of bang up to date to this year. This is kind of really kind of moving forward into where the work, that kind of minimal composition, really kind of pushing that even more and more and just kind of trying to reduce the palette and the composition down. And then this is the installation that I did in beginning of December, which was in the Unitom store in Manchester. And the curator who's helped kind of set this place up, they took over the old Magma kind of collective and team, because sadly it had I think it had gone out of business during lockdown. So they kind of brought it together and put it into a new space. And as this was kind of being set up and about to open, the guy that runs it kind of turned around and said, look, you know, do you want to put some work in? So I've got an idea. Sent me a WhatsApp, and this is kind of what came out of it, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit, but it's been a lovely moment to be able to have that work there and actually kind of stand back and see what where the work has gone after the past 18 months of kind of studio work. It's great to kind of see it out in this kind of context. And this is kind of coming up full speed to right now, and kind of taking photographs of the work here that kind of influenced the collection for the Haworth and for the Distill exhibition. Again, this piece has been done specifically for this exhibition, and kind of running again on that negative space aspect. I think this is Spring Breaker, and just kind of throwing a bit more colour at it, and kind of in reaction to probably the colour that probably I kind of saw lacking in Accrington town centre, and any kind of, you probably see it in a lot of northern towns at the moment, where there seems to be a certain amount of identity that's kind of been drained down through one thing and another, and kind of austerity, and just where most towns are now. This has been quite an interesting process, kind of having a look at that and having a look at the Haworth collection to create this kind of body of work that's kind of pulling those two different elements together. The colour of the glasswork and the Tiffany collection to then seeing the kind of the lack of colour around the town centre, and kind of fuse those elements into the compositions that you'll see in the exhibition. Just make random artwork, yeah. Spraying my own work and not somebody's house or wall.
Not the side of the gallery.
Yeah. Now, funnily enough, this was kind of the one moment of colour that I did see in the town centre that really stuck in my mind for a couple of reasons. It was kind of really brightly coloured as you kind of walk into Accrington, but it also reminded me of the Millennium Falcon on the cockpit, the glass window. That's the kid aspect in me. But I just loved that little kind of bounce of colour, and that's kind of jumped into these pieces here, which I did as almost kind of like test tile pieces, which are the backgrounds of the photographs of a few markings which I've found around Accrington town centre, and then I've done a stencil of the there's a piece in the collection stamp box with this lovely kind of jade colour underneath, and then this metal fretwork over the top. So I took a photograph and then kind of cut that out and used that as a stencil. So I was kind of bringing the two elements of the town centre and the collection in together, and then kind of putting my own kind of stencil and stamp mark there, which is kind of typical of the work I do with the fluoro sprays and the colours. And then this is literally taken probably about 5 days ago, just kind of bringing it up to date again. And this is kind of where the studio is at the moment.
throw it to the floor. Anybody got any questions?
So I'm interested in what you've just been talking about, really, about Accrington and spending time in Accrington.
Yep.
And how different that is, because you've talked a lot about Toronto and you've talked about other places you've visited. And I kind of wonder how different the paintings are, how different the paintings might be that you have created in response to Accrington than they might have been from Toronto or one of those other places.
It's an interesting question because the guy that I've worked with, the curator for the Unitom store, we've been in conversation for a couple of years. He's been following my work and kind of really supporting it, and put the suggestion to me about what would be really interesting is to get you to do your usual photography and kind of recording a city and doing it of 2 or 3 different places, whether it be Manchester or whether it be Barcelona or somewhere like that, and doing 3 sets of work, each set of work actually concentrated on that one place and seeing how you react to each and how they would differ. We had a very short window to kind of get this kind of done and put in place, and kind of going out into the town centre and taking those photographs was one of the kind of key elements to this, and kind of finding that reaction of what I see and what I would kind of put into the work. It is something I'd definitely love to do again and do a kind of bigger series of, definitely.
You've talked a lot about influences and you've talked a lot about things that inspire you, but you've only touched on emotion a few times. And for me, when I see a painting and I really respond to it, it's because of the emotion that I'm getting from it. And I just wondered if you wanted to, you may not want to talk about it, but if you did, what do you think the emotions are that you are communicating in your work?
It is something I did want to talk about. I probably sidetracked myself a little bit there. There's an emotional response to influence and to the stuff that I've been looking at for many years, which I've wanted to pull into the work and really kind of work with and kind of distill into my own kind of narrative and style. But there is also an emotional response there with the work in terms of there is almost like a diary aspect on a daily basis when I'm actually creating work that will seep into it, whether that be an emotional reaction to personal moments or moments in the studio. There's with the way that a title works as well, I try and put that hook onto the work of how I feel about the work and how I'm feeling at the time, and actually trying to pull something in, whether it be a song title that's kind of a piece of music that's playing at the moment, and that title will feel relevant to that completion and that moment of kind of creating the work. So there is actually quite a fair amount of emotion.
You've talked a lot about technique, you've
Yeah.
talked a lot about influences, and you've talked a lot about restraint. And to me, I kind of felt like, hang on a minute, we know that artists have got an emotional connection with their work and something they're trying to get out there and share with other people. So I kind of felt like it was missing, and I wanted you to talk about it. I wanted to kind of draw it out of you.
Good point. Good point. I think I do think there's a hell of a lot of emotion. I think there's a difference between brave and confident.
Okay.
It is something that I never expected to be sat here having this conversation, I'll be perfectly frank, and actually being put on the spot to actually do it and being put forward to do it from Ed from Creative Lancashire kind of took, not the wind out my sails, but it kind of took me out of my comfort zone a fair amount. So I was a little bit nervous about doing this tonight because it's not something I've ever really done before. So I think the confidence thing where I'm going with the work now and trying to minimise that and using tools to minimise the compositions to make them more bold is an emotional reaction in itself, and is a way of me kind of finding myself and finding my own confidence and finding my own voice more, and especially as I'm getting older as well. It's that kind of, you know, we're here for a limited time. This is the work I want to be making. And yeah, and this is, I want to be even more bold. You know, I want the work to be bigger. I want it to be more minimal with bigger marks and just, yeah. Funnily enough, somebody has actually suggested recently about doing a mural. Some people have told me, no, I don't think your work would suit, which has then kicked me off and gone, no, I think I'm going to prove you wrong, actually.
Okay, is it time for one more, Ed? Or yeah, one more. Yeah.
You've got some resin on some of those paintings,
Yes.
and you've been very much focused on putting it on blank canvas. I like the resin. Why did you do that?
There was we had a very short time kind of window to get this exhibition put together and the work to get that in place. And like anything with this, ideas take a little bit of time to generate, and then once they start to generate, it's like something starts firing off and kind of firing your synapses, and one thing kind of fires off and then it leads to another, and that's what happened with the resin. I was trying to do these kind of smaller pieces and pull different elements in, not just of existing work, but new work based on what I was looking at and what I was thinking about for the Haworth and its collection, the building, the site, and then the town centre. And as I did those smaller pieces and taking those images that I'd photographed in the town centre and trying to find markings and an identity that I would normally look at around kind of various towns and cities, it was finding a way of linking those images and those pieces to what's here at the Haworth. And for me, that was using the resin was a way of trying to recreate that effect of the collection of the Tiffany glass and trying to bring that in. Probably not a wise idea to use something that you've never used before 2 weeks before a show open. But it was a good challenge and I really enjoyed it. But there is something else that the person that I have the studio with next to me works in glass, so we're looking at doing a collaboration and specifically kind of trying to recreate some of this stuff and still keep some of those elements from Accrington as well, and do some specific pieces to insert somewhere within to the gallery and the collection. So that's still kind of ongoing. It set off a conversation, a collaboration here with the gallery and the curators that I want to kind of keep on going.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody, and thanks to Ian H. Williams.